Life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely, but rather to skid in sideways in a cloud of smoke, thoroughly worn out, screaming, "What a ride!" At first glance, this sentence can leave you puzzled. What does it mean to reach the end of life, skidding sideways in a cloud of smoke, thoroughly worn out? It means rejecting the idea of a life lived with caution, without risks, always safe. For Hunter Stockton Thompson, living meant going all the way, squeezing every drop of experience, without worrying about reaching the end in one piece. His entire existence was just that, a ride without brakes, full of excess, contradictions, mistakes, and truths, shouted straight into the world's face. Sports reporter, journalist, writer, fierce observer of society, and much more. His life is a ride worth retracing. Hunter Thompson was born in 1937 in Louisville, Kentucky, into a middle-class American family. His father worked as a public employee, his mother as a librarian. But behind an appearance of normalcy, his adolescence was turbulent and above all marked by the death of his father when he was just 14. His mother fell into alcoholism, and the household became an even harsher place. In 1955, at only 18, after a botched robbery, he was expelled from school and ended up in jail for a short time. A stigma that never left him and that shaped his relationship with authority. A visceral hatred for rules, institutions, and anyone trying to impose orders from above. After prison, he joined the Air Force. He wanted to become a pilot, but was rejected. Still, he found a place as a sports reporter for a military magazine. It was there that he began to realize that writing was the only thing he could do, but above all, the only thing that could truly save him. He would say it many times. "I became a writer because I couldn't be anything else." A sentence that holds the whole truth of a man incapable of fitting into a normal world. He tried countless jobs, taxi driver, salesman, delivery boy, but nothing worked. Often he was fired, other times he wasn't even hired. In 1963, he married Sandra Dawn Conklin, known as Sandy, and that same year, their only son, Juan, was born. But even with a family behind him, his life remained unstable, marked by constant moves, precarious jobs, and financial struggles. He wrote letters left and right, to writers, to politicians, even to Lyndon Johnson, the President of the United States. And in one of those letters addressed to him, later published in his book, The Proud Highway, Thompson even asked to be appointed governor of Samoa, describing it as a peaceful place where he could write a novel of crushing importance. He said it with irony. The idea was that such a remote and peaceful place would give him the freedom to dedicate himself to writing a great novel without being disturbed by American madness and corruption. Crazy? Brilliant? An artist? The first turning point came in 1966 when he was 29 and was offered to write a feature on the Hells Angels, the infamous motorcycle club born in California in the late 1940s that had become a symbol of rebellion, violence, and life outside the rules. Thompson didn't just interview them. He lived with them for months, observing their rituals, their parties, their excesses, their violence, and the fascination they held over American society. In the end, however, he paid a heavy price. During a party, he was brutally beaten by the Hells Angels themselves. According to their internal rules, when one angel hit an outsider, all the others had to join in. That experience became the heart of his book, Hells Angels, a report that exposed from the inside the violence and emptiness of that world. It was a work that shocked and fascinated because it combined investigative journalism with visceral writing, consecrating Thompson as an original and controversial author. In 1970, he wrote the article, "The Kentucky Derby is Decadent and Depraved." He was supposed to cover America's most famous horse race, but instead of describing the event, he focused on the crowd. Bored rich people, drunkards, vulgar and hypocritical faces that embodied the rotten core of the country. The text was chaotic, made of scattered notes, personal thoughts, and ironic visions, accompanied by the wild drawings of Ralph Steadman, an English illustrator with a grotesque and visionary style. Thompson thought it was a failure, but it was precisely there that Gonzo journalism was born, his trademark. A kind of journalism that dives into the stories, mixing truth and invention, excess and irony. In 1971 came the book that made him immortal, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. It was a hallucinatory journey, written under the influence of drugs, that turned the pursuit of the American dream into a surreal nightmare. In the following years, his private life began to crumble. In 1980, his marriage to Sandra came to an end, worn out by excess and by his lifestyle that was impossible to tame. In 1998, his work became a cult film with Johnny Depp, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. To prepare for the role, the actor moved into Thompson's house for weeks, living his daily life and even sleeping in a room with crates of explosives stacked next to the bed. An anecdote that says it all. Hunter wasn't playing a character. He really was like that. He lived surrounded by guns, explosives, fireworks, and every kind of dangerous object. He loved shooting, blowing things up, and collecting dynamite and bombs as if they were toys. He liked the idea of having everything ready to unleash chaos, as if he were always in a state of personal war against the world. And he jumped from one thing to another. He began closely following American politics, and in 1972, he published Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail 72, a book in which he told the story of that year's presidential race without filters. For him, President Richard Nixon represented everything he hated: corruption, hypocrisy, and diseased power. In those years, he even decided to run for sheriff of the town of Aspen, Colorado, with his provocative freak power movement. He shaved his head bald to mock his rival, who wore long hair and launched surreal but also revolutionary proposals, changing the name of Aspen to Fat City, decriminalizing soft drugs, disarming the police. Of course he lost, but that campaign remains in history as one of the most eccentric and rebellious political gestures in America. Hunter spent the rest of his life at Owl Farm, his farm bunker in Colorado, which he turned into a true headquarters of chaos. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, he kept writing and publishing, solidifying his reputation as a one-of-a-kind journalist. At the same time, he became a cult figure, a sought-after guest on talk shows and documentaries, often showing up drunk or high with his provocative, theatrical, and unpredictable style. Owl Farm itself became legendary, always full of friends, musicians, journalists, activists, and even politicians. Between rifles, sleepless nights, and wild parties, the house turned into a symbol of his way of life, a mix of anarchy and nonstop spectacle. In 2003, he published Kingdom of Fear, a collection of memoirs and essays where he told his life and philosophy without filters. That same year, he married Anita Bamuk, a much younger woman who stayed by his side until the very end. 2 years later, in 2005, at the age of 67, he decided to bring his wild ride to an end. He took his own life right there at Owl Farm. The gesture was not entirely unexpected. Thompson had often said, both publicly and privately, that he didn't want to grow old in misery, fragile, or dependent on others. He wanted to be the one to decide when it was time to go. Those who knew him well said that, although devastated by the loss, they were not surprised, because Thompson himself had prepared them for years for such a possibility. His wife Anita later said that he had planned it carefully and that it wasn't an impulsive act. He left behind a short, blunt note titled, "Football Season is Over," where he wrote about being old and tired. In those few lines he wrote, "Football season is over. No more games, no more bombs, no more walking, no more fun, no more swimming." That is 17 years past 50, 17 more than I needed or wanted. Boring. I am always grouchy. No fun for anybody. You are getting greedy. Act your old age. Relax. This won't hurt. Anita said she loved him and respected his choice, no matter how painful it was. She then took care of his literary legacy and of Owl Farm, turning it into a sort of sanctuary for Hunter's memory. She published posthumous works and continues to keep his legacy alive. His son, Juan, born from his first marriage, was very close to him. He spoke of his father's act as a brutal gesture, hard to accept, but also consistent with his personality. Years later, he would tell their story in an autobiographical book, retracing the complex yet genuine bond he had with his father. By then, he had also become a father himself, giving Hunter the chance to be a grandfather before his death. Johnny Depp was deeply shaken by it. He had formed a strong and intense bond with Hunter, yet still found the strength to honor his last wish, perhaps the most extravagant of them all, to have his ashes shot into the sky. So the actor organized a memorable ceremony, spending over $3 million to build a massive cannon in the shape of a fist with 2 thumbs up, the symbol of Gonzo journalism. In front of family, friends, and celebrities, the cannon blasted Hunter's ashes high above the Colorado mountains, accompanied by fireworks, music, and rivers of alcohol. One last show, excessive and theatrical, just like the way he had always lived. For Thompson, life had no meaning. It was absurd, full of violence and lies. It couldn't be saved. It couldn't be made clean. After Kennedy's assassination, he wrote, "I was not prepared for the death of hope, but here it is. Ignore it at your own risk." He believed that hope wasn't a light guiding us forward, but a deception that sooner or later burns out. Thompson had seen the illusion of a better America collapse, and with it, the idea that the future could truly offer something different. For him, living meant facing disillusion head-on, without pretending there was some hidden meaning to rescue us. He argued that life was a constant betrayal of illusions. Those who claimed to be good and peaceful, he said, carried the same rage as the Hell's Angels. He wrote, "The same violence the angels pour out in public is being quietly bottled up in 1,000 private homes all over the country." He was well aware of human brutality and recognized it in himself as well. After living with the bikers, he admitted, "I learned a lot about myself. I saw a very ugly side of me. Now I keep my mouth shut. I've become a professional coward." He was being ironic, but not entirely. He knew violence lived within him, just like in everyone else. At the same time, he never sought balance or moderation. He once said, "I am a person who does almost everything in excess, and that would be inevitable with drugs, as with most other things." For him, the meaning of life wasn't about longevity, but about intensity. Better to live with great intensity and fear than to be anesthetized and passive. And then there was his ironically spiritual vision. He spoke of a great circle where, after death, you are judged and sent back, maybe as a dog in Bangladesh during a monsoon. An image that once again revealed his philosophy. No heaven, no salvation, just the absurd return of existence. Politics for him was proof that life was meaningless. Richard Nixon, Bill Clinton, Lyndon Johnson. He saw them all as symbols of the same corruption. He once said Lyndon Johnson would have made a fine Hell's Angel. He was convinced that violence wasn't a problem of the marginalized, but of power itself. He spoke and wrote of an America obsessed with control, paranoia, and fear. In his later writings, his voice became sharper. Life was a cage, and the only way to stay alive was to rebel, laugh, and destroy the lies. In the end, Hunter Thompson didn't leave us with a positive meaning or a model to follow. He left us with a warning. Life is a wild ride, meaningless, and without salvation. And precisely for that reason, it must be lived all the way without holding back. So the question is no longer whether life has meaning, but whether we are willing to face it without filters, without illusions, without necessarily making it to the end, safe and sound. Hunter looks at us from afar and seems to say, "It doesn't matter if we end up wrecked. What matters is that at the end we can say it was worth it and shout, 'What a fuck ride.'"